We would stay together for a whole cycle. Like I have a lesson that I put together just for a different program that she's going to look at and talk about and say, oh, I don't like this or I do like that. And I'm going to take notes on it just like she's going to do for me. And then we'll switch down. And when you get to Kimberly, she's going to talk. She has a lot of information she's going to give to you. And so if we need to make it a little bit longer at the end, we'll try to work on that. The hope is that this is going to be fun. You get to do a little movement. Whoever does have the time when they're the single person at the dating event, that you can read Kimberly's information. All right? I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. The people on this side are going to go first. Get my timer go on my side. Sure. We're getting ready to go. Hope I can do this right.
Alright.
Set it at 5 minutes. And go.
Mine is for my first grade science class. An experiment. We learned about plant needs, what a plant needs after it needs, and now we're learning what happens with it when they don't get their needs. So we're doing an experiment.
So you're doing a really good job because you have an academic language objective and you also have content objectives about science. So that's really fantastic. It's moving your generation. Your hook is great. This is something they already know. Which pulls a new basis of new lessons, something that really is really terrific. So perfect. The only thing that would suggest, let's look at a couple things here. When you're teaching, you can read this later. It's a case study of a second language learner and how classes that are taught that are interactive and have more than just words really help him learn versus another class he has where it's all presentation and he doesn't get it. So you can read that later. It's on the page. You can read that when you have your off time. Yes. So what I want to focus on right now is a couple of things I want you to look for in your lesson. I want you to look and check your hook. And I made a checklist so it's easy for you to do. See if your hook uses what they knew before to tie to the new lesson. Do you have something that connects those two things? Especially since your lesson has been partially taught already and you're combining it to what they just learned about plants. So make sure your hook actually has something where they understand a piece of the old to bridge to the piece of the new.
And that would be like a yes for
So see if you can put something in your lesson plan where you can either use something they already are familiar with, something that they already understand. For example, just give me an example. If I'm going to teach the parts of a tree, I want students to understand the parts of a tree. I want to tie that to something they already know. I'm like, a tree is like your hand. It has a trunk, it has branches, and it has leaves. So the hand they already understand, and they can look at their hand physically and connect what they already know with the new thing, which is how a tree is structured. Also, try to use, one of the problems with academic language for all students, not just ESL learners, is that academic instruction is pulled out of context. If we were out in the forest and we were talking about trees, it would be a lot easier for students to understand, but we're in a classroom which is very sterile. So one of the problems for second language learners and students who just end up academically behind is they don't have this kind of context clues to help them understand what's going on. So anything you can use to put in your lesson plan that would help them besides words.
Guys, that's our first 5 minutes.
Pictures.
We're going to have to ask you to pause. That's our time for our first 5 minutes. You have to stop dating each other now. If the other person has not had the opportunity, and I'm assuming that you guys haven't because we haven't switched yet either, we're going to give another 5 minutes. And the second person is going to share their information.
Okay, good. So try to build your plans are wonderful. I don't know if you're using it in your presentation part, but try to put it in your presentation because that's where you're building contextual knowledge. Perfect. And the third thing on the checklist, say you've got, we're on the third thing on your checklist. And think about it this way. The hook, I do teacher presenting, we do working as a group, and then you do they prove that they know it. So for ESL learners and students who are academically behind, it's really helpful if they can work in pairs or with partners because it's one confusing. So see if you can have something in the middle where they're, like if they're going to do an experiment, have them do within partners. They didn't ask each other questions.
I did my main
And at the end, they need to give you some kind of proof as an assessment that they understand it, and you need to assess the scientific method part, which is the academic language part, and you need to assess the actual experiment. Do you understand the science part of it separately? They need to have two different assessments so that you know they get the academic language, they understand the scientific method, and you get to understand the actual science and biology part of it.
Words, the meaning of those words to the class, and in order to prompt use of prior knowledge, the teacher will ask questions about the pictures. So in this particular
I'm so ready to hear your lesson. Holly, what you got for me?
Okay, I did the one that Professor Whalen just gave it. We were, it's kind of a mixture. It's about a morning meeting.
Science Planning to come to your school at what time next week? Did you decide? Can you write that down? You don't know yet? You want to still have time to ponder? Like I'm going to physically take her phone and videotape her taking her lesson in here.
I think I've decided to do it.
December, January. But I wanted you to have that in your brain. I'm not sure.
I want to ask you guys a couple of questions and as closure and make sure everybody understands what we were talking about individually. Part one of your checklist, number one was, your lesson plan has a hook or an introduction that activates student prior knowledge and ties the lesson to something students already understand. Can somebody give me an example from one of your own actual lessons where you tied what you did to what they already understood? Where you join that together? I have examples from you guys, so I know it exists, but yes.
I'm going to give an example of Shira's. She said that what they did before fall break was they were going over what plants need, and then when they were coming back, they're going over, again, like what they need, and then kind of go, okay, well, if we take away this, what will happen? It's like going over what they already went over, like, what plants need in order to survive, and kind of going further into it.
Yes, so she tied what they learned when they were talking about what plants need to survive to what happens if you take it away and let's do an experiment about it. So she tied the lesson that they had before to the new lesson. Excellent. Okay, second part was the presentation part, that builds context and background knowledge using supplementary materials, photos, videos, actions, acting out things. Who can give me an example of that? When you did your presentation, you used something else to help them understand, other than just words? Yes.
I used the video in my hook.
Yes, you used the video in your hook. And was that you that used the Schoolhouse Rock? The Schoolhouse Rock video where they had subjects and predicates is an excellent example of how to build that background knowledge using visuals and something else that helps all learners, not just English language learners, but all learners understand. It's not just flat paper. It gives them a context to see it in. It gives them examples. It has visuals, it has action in it. The video, the Schoolhouse Rock is a perfect example because it actually has actions, words, and examples all mixed together. It's a perfect example. One of you had a really good example. The second part of that was separate content and language objectives. Let's say, who was it was doing categorizing? You were doing categorizing where you wanted to make sure that your students in your math lesson could actually categorize based on length. But in order to be able to do that, they have to understand what categorize means. So when you teach your learners, whether they're English language learners or not, you'll get better results if you actually teach categorization as a separate objective and then assess it before you teach your content objective. That way, you make sure that they have the skill they need to actually do the content lesson. Can anybody else give me an example of a dual, in tandem language and content objective? Can you give me another example? I gave you one from hers. I pulled one from hers, but of your own. We talked about yours. You want to tell them about yours?
Well, I have two objectives for my lesson, really. One objective is the content, which is what happens when a plant doesn't get its needs and how do we care for plants. The other one is also equal parts the scientific method. So we're learning about the scientific method, how it's used, what it is.
Right, so she is actively teaching the scientific method, and then they're going to use that to do the content objective. So she's going to make sure that they understand what that means before she expects them to apply it. That way she doesn't have students when they go to do the content objective who are confused and don't know what to do. Maybe they even understand the concepts, but they don't know how to show it if they don't know what that word means. Next. Hi. Would you like that? Okay. Can somebody give me an example from one of their lessons where they have a we do, the guided practice part that supports ELL through group work, small pair activity, turn and talk, think, pair, share, something like that out of your own lesson? Can somebody give me an example of that? Go ahead.
The thing when we talk about the names and obeying things like a real idea instead of just like choosing like the name, maybe like the coordinates. Where like I guess they can always mention the kid whose name it is can help the other kid in case they get the little information.
Right, she's going to put all the letters of the alphabet in a bag and have them work in partners, pulling the letters out, calling them out to each other. And then instead of having a set name that they're going to spell her name, have them work with their partner and spell each other's names. And that gives them more practice in a pair. And since the partner already knows how to spell their name, they can help correct them. So the correction is not in front of a class, it's not the teacher, it's their friend helping them. It helps, it's friends supporting friends in such classroom. So that's a really good example. The last part was the UbD, the independent production part, which is the assessment that has assessments that directly tie the language and content objectives separately, one for each objective. Can somebody talk about their assessments in their lesson plan, their assessment for their language objective, and their assessment for their content objective? I know some people have examples, but think for a minute. How did you assess the skill separate from the content? It's the hardest one. Yes.
I had an assessment for the content of subjects and predicates, and then we talked about another assessment for the skill of reading and fluency.
Yeah, you're summarizing. So what she did was she was teaching grammar, and then they were applying it in summarizing. They were having to use it in order to summarize. So she pre-taught that skill, she assessed it, and she separately assessed her summarizing activity. So she knows for sure that her kids understood the language objective and they also understood the content objective in her classroom because they're assessed separately. So that was a very good example. Y'all had really great examples. Can you see how UbD design fits really closely with the SIOP model? It's really close. All you have to do is tweak your lesson plan. I wanted to let you know too that in your email waiting for you is a research article about the SIOP method that explains more about it. And I'm also going to email you the materials that I have here tonight so you have them for yourself if you want to read up more on them. And I want you to please remember to email me, respond to my email by emailing me a copy of your lesson plan because I would like to see how you adapted it and make sure everybody's on track. And I'll give you some feedback if you will send me my email is in your inbox waiting for you because I sent you a copy of the research article. But if you would send me a copy of your lesson plan, then I can double check it and I'll send you feedback about the SIOP method.
The feedback that she sends you, you don't have to put into Blackboard.
No,
she's
don't.
doing this
It's
just as a nicety for dual language learning.
Exactly. And the nice thing about the SIOP model, which you'll read more in the research article, is it not only pulls up English language learners, but it pulls up all students, including students who are struggling learners, students with learning disabilities. And we all want our students to succeed. I know you're very motivated as teachers. It's obvious you really care about your students. So, and I know many of you talked about the fact that you have classes with different levels in it. This will actually help level your classes out a little bit because the partner work will help the people who are just slightly more advanced. Those students can be helping with people who are struggling. So it'll help you smooth out some of that leveling and the pacing of your class to smooth out. That's really nice. Are there any questions about it? Yes.
Can I possibly like read the article then submit this when I send
Sure.
it?
You can email it to me. No problem. Any other questions? Content related? Language related? Anything else? Well, thank you for letting me come into the class. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed talking to all of you.
You all worked really, really hard.
You did a great
so I
job.
really appreciate it. I know we have a lot to cover.